Fabulous. So I think it's the top of the hour now. It's 4 p.m. where I am in England, and 5 p.m. I think for Gerben, our speaker today. I'm just going to start off with a few slides before we get going in earnest. So welcome to this webinar. I'm sure many of you know that we've been running these CAPDAS webinars since September 2020, and then we have longer sessions around a few specific qualitative software programs coming up with my colleague Sarah Bullock. Unfortunately, she can't be with us today. But I'm here and I'm Christina Silva, and I run the CAPDAS networking project, and I'm delighted to be here with you all. But let's get on to the reason that we're all gathered here today. So I would like to introduce you to our speaker for today, who is someone who shares with me a passion for qualitative research methods and best practices for teaching and learning them. So I'm really delighted to have a webinar on this important topic. It's something that's very close to my heart. So it's really lovely to hear other teachers who are also passionate about the same things share their thoughts about it. So welcome to Dr. Gerben Moerman, who works in the Faculty of Social and Behavioural Sciences at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And he engages in social science research methods in many different ways. And although he's well acquainted with survey methodology and mixed methods research, his particular interest and specialism is in qualitative research methods, including qualitative interviewing and different forms of analysis, such as grounded theory, content analysis, discourse analysis, and also ethnomethodology. Gerben is an enthusiastic and long-standing user of the qualitative analysis software program Atlas TI. And at the University in Amsterdam, he teaches methodology courses at a range of different levels. So from entry-level methods introductions to advanced methods electives for research master students. Gerben deeply enjoys teaching research methods, and his enthusiasm and skills for that were recognized in 2011 when he became the University of Amsterdam Lecturer of the Year. So I'm totally delighted that he's here today to share his passion with us by speaking about qualitative analysis, teaching and learning, and some of his tips and tricks to learn that trade. So thanks again for being here, Gerben. Over to you.
Thank you, Christina. It was a wonderful introduction, and it makes me a bit shy. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for all the people actually showing up here. Beforehand, we spoke about this, how many people will actually show up, how's the weather in the UK, but since everyone is from all around the world, the weather doesn't really matter. So I'm really, really happy to do this and to share some tricks of the trade. And actually, we made the appointment to do this, I think, last year already, and we've been postponing and thinking, and I've been postponing, not Christina, of course. But I was really happy to do it, to kind of think about the ethnomethods I use while teaching, and we have been using while teaching for several years. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and we practiced a lot in previous years, so it must be working. It is, but I can't see you anymore. Now I have to, yeah, now I can see you. I'm really happy that some of you have their cameras on. So thanks, Giuseppe and Onur. So at least I can see you nod or disagree, or so if other people feel they like interacting and they like me to mispronounce their name, please share your camera, because it's much nicer to actually see people than, well, the pictures are nice as well. Thank you, Xiaoyi. Thank you, Flor or Cameron, Genevieve. Thanks a lot. Xena, very good. It's much easier to teach. Trick of the trade one when teaching online is ask your students. Well, actually, I force my students to turn on their camera. But I'm very happy that we do most of our teaching again live. As Christina just shared, I work at the University of Amsterdam in the sociology department, and I teach mostly methods, some mixed methods, some introduction methods courses, but mostly qualitative methods. So what I'm be talking about today is qualitative methods, and mostly about two courses that I teach on qualitative analysis. But before getting there, oh yeah, and of course I share the joy of presenting, showing you this book again, Tricks of the Trade, because I think it's a wonderful book. It's already old, but I try to copy some of the tricks, and actually in my teaching I even copied some of the tricks. I'm not going to talk about it, but the Bernie Beck's trick really works well in teaching. So to start with, I would like to come to a typification of our students, because some of us, I assume, are teaching for, or at least I definitely sure, Christina teaches a lot of PhD students or people who are in a post-academic field, are working inside or outside academia, and they want to learn how to do qualitative analysis, probably with software. And these are the easiest people to teach. I'm sorry, Christina, to tell you, sometimes people struggle a bit with computers, but that was the past. Oh, I'm sorry, things are falling here. But these are the easiest people to teach, the post-academic people, because they enroll for a course, they come to you. If they're stuck, they're really easy to teach because you can help them out, you can take them out of the swamp, as Susan Friese calls it, and they leave happy. It's like the fairy tale, they live happily ever after. PhD students, well, they are also part of the easiest ones. Some of them are puzzling, some are looking for, okay, why do I actually need to code, or do I need to code? Probably not, or maybe not. Do I need to use software for this, and why should I use? And obviously there are groups of students that feel that they come into these courses because they're forced by their supervisor. I hope none of you is here forced by a supervisor that tell them, oh, you need to learn how to code, work with software. These are hard to teach, of course. But the lower you get in level, or if you could say so, research master students or master students are also partly part of the easy one, if they're not forced by the program. So if they're in an elective, that's usually nice teaching. The puzzling ones are usually the ones that who are not working on a research project yet, but you're training them in order to make sure that they can write their thesis and do their thesis research. So I'm often dealing with these kind of questions on why should I? Now, the hardest students to teach are the bottom ones, the bachelor students, at least in my opinion. The undergraduate students, we call them bachelor students in Amsterdam. It's weird in other countries, I understand, but undergraduates. And some of the eager ones, they are easy to teach. The puzzling ones is why should I, or why would I do this? Why the hell do I do this? Does it count towards the grades? We all recognize these students. Probably we've been in some courses ourselves as well. But mostly they're forced by the program. And here you see kind of the distribution. So the easiest, the post-academic ones, most of them are easy, whereas with the bachelor ones, you're dealing with many more slightly reluctant students. And actually, I love these students. I love to teach those students because there's a world to win. I also love the other ones, but okay. I'm going to talk mostly thus about these courses that I've been teaching in the bachelor programs, in the undergraduate program for sociology, which is a second year course, and we have a weird system. In June, It used to be January, but now it's June. In June, our students come, and for 4 weeks, we teach them how to do qualitative analysis. It's a ridiculous system. I can't say that out loud, of course, but we have 4 weeks of teaching these students how to do qualitative analysis, how to use software for that. It's about 200 students that we have. We used to have less, but it increased, luckily. And I've been teaching the course more or less since 2007, and in a condensed form since 2012. And the last time I taught it was actually 2 years ago, 2020, and now a colleague has taken over. Since I'm also program director, so I had to do other stuff with pain in my heart. The other course I will be speaking a little bit about, although it is easy students, are the research master students. These are students that are in a competitive program working towards a PhD. So it's usually smaller groups and extremely eager students. So mostly I'll be talking about the bachelor course. And the prior knowledge students have, because they have a lot of prior knowledge, is with us in I'm sorry, it was too quick, in 4 sociology, sociological theory courses, from critical theory to Merton-like middle range theory, to more post-colonial theories, to more structure agency debates, to symbolic interactionism. I teach them a methodology course. They're taught in 2 courses on basic and advanced statistics, also these compressed courses, those are in January. And they had what we call an Amsterdam research project, which is a fieldwork course. So students collect data, and they do that by using observation as well as interviewing. So in this second year course, it's the first time that they're actually going to analyze some qualitative material. And before getting into tricks, and don't worry, I'll get into some tips and tricks, I'll share something about my view on teaching. I don't believe we teach empty vessels. Absolutely not. We teach students whose heads are filled with all kinds of notions based on these theory courses, for instance, based on lay knowledge, based on other programs they did, based on anything else, but they have knowledge. And sometimes their knowledge is a bit skewed, is a bit biased towards certain thing, but they're not empty vessel. It's not just like filling up a bottle, an empty cup with some water. It is, you have to deal with what is already in there. And that is very often the hardest part in teaching, dealing with the typifications that these students have. So I deliberately use the phenomenological idea of Schutz on typifications, because they're full of typification. I'm going to share a bit about that. Now, we also typify. What are our students? So I typify them using emojis. We all typify. And I just typified our students in a rather loose way, using this little table that I showed before. Probably it's not a very good typification, but no one actually objected and no one frowned completely. Maybe you felt like, oh, this is a simplification. Where's the data behind that? But you were too polite to actually say that. I'll get back to the trick I used there. We're not empty vessels, we're not piggy banks, we're not, as Paulo Freire wrote about, banks that where we deposit in the pedagogy of the it's not repressed, but I can't find the correct word, of the oppressed, that's it. The pedagogy of the oppressed. We're not empty vessels or banks where people donate their money or put their money in the piggy banks, as I nicely have been drawing here. Does it work? Yes, it does. They're not like that. They're not piggy banks, and they're not spaces where we deposit knowledge. They're full of knowledge, and in the view of Freire, we should use this knowledge and we should take people serious. And it's not a very serious way of presenting it with these silly images, but I thought I should liven things up a bit. And learning then is that we typify in new ways. We are not the empty vessels. We learn by redefining our knowledge, maybe adding some new knowledge here and there. And this comes from Biggs and Tang and Kennedy. But we learn by adding some new knowledge and maybe slightly changing our view on certain things. And I think it's important when we look at this to see what expectations students have beforehand. So for many years, I ran, in a qualitative analysis course, I ran a survey before they entered class, how they look at the course beforehand. And it was interesting to see what kind of typifications they had. And they wrote stuff like this: I love qualitative researchers, I hate computers. They didn't literally say, I love methodology as philosophy, but quite some of our students are really eager on theory, sociological theory, and they look at methodology as a way of dealing with ontology and epistemology and having discussions late at night or during the day where they can talk about reality and the limits to reality and the limits to knowledge and the role of interpretation or typification in those. As you find out, I loved it too, but I'm a methodologist. And people also say these kind of things. Good qualitative research is virtually impossible. It's really hard. It's difficult. I want to learn about it because, and then they come up with easy superficial lines such as, oh, it's subjective and stuff like that. They don't say this literally until the first assignment. Where is the analyze button? And I hope Christina is not receiving that question so often anymore, but are you? Sometimes, okay. I'm receiving it less and less, or have been receiving it less and less, but they have been trained in SPSS. And there you click somewhere, and then in the end, you can produce a cross tabulation, a regression model. You still need to understand what happened there, but the software does a lot of things. And then, well, it feels like, where is this bloody button in my case, teaching Atlas TI? Where is it in Atlas TI? And they come with simplifications such as the software is the method, and we see that sometimes even in published articles. I heard a professor saying this in a sociology conference. We analyze the material using Atlas TI, so we have a pretty deep understanding, which is complete nonsense, of course. It's like saying, I used a pencil and therefore my book is way better than your book because you used Microsoft Word. People suffer from neophilia, which is also related to these issues with computers and putting the computers first. Neophilia, loving all the new tools. Hey, we can now do AI stuff. Let's do it. Maybe we should also think about what we're doing. And quite often there are these typification. Okay, after this first meeting, I know what button to click, but I don't know why. I need to code because people tell me, but why the hell do I click on it? Oh, Asma, are you recognizing that? Yes. Okay, so there's typification of yourself or of others. And now you have to turn on your mic. Oh gosh.
I guess of others.
Okay, good.
Of myself too, some of the things that, but I think many of these comments maybe from undergrad.
Yeah.
Master students will know better, I guess. Or PhD students.
Yeah, well, one of them, as the software is the method, was said by a very famous sociology professor.
Oh.
So yeah, most of them, yes. And the neophilia, I love these kind of tools, is also what I also suffered from as a PhD student for years. All new tools led to new research questions. Yeah, that's why my PhD took so long. Our typification, or my typification, of the course is that qualitative analysis and interpretation, and I use both of the terms, is done by reflexively relying on theories and methods of analysis. The software is only a helpful tool. That's it. It's a tool like a pencil would be, or a piece of paper, or whatever, a scissors. So how then do I try to teach students, and how do we try to do this? Well, I used multiple tricks, and I'm going to summarize this, and this is kind of the contents of the presentation. First, I use stories a lot, which is classic lecturing. I will say a few things about this. I teach them methods or methodology. I exaggerate, as you see. I do that physically, but I also do it in words, and it sometimes helps. I frustrate my students. Sorry, that went too quick, but I hope, yeah. I frustrate my students deliberately. We'll talk about the ethics. I would love to have the questions afterwards. We try to tease the curiosity of the students, and especially with the research master students, I use some creativity assignments. So I'm going to show you a few things. Behind this are multiple learning theories. I'm not a scholar on teaching, but I did do my readings and my courses. So ideas around active learning and experiential learning or guided discovery. But I love to lecture, so we also use classic lecturing and in-class instruction. So the tricks. Here they are, and there will be 6 tricks, and I'll be presenting them. The first one is on stories we learn by. As Christina said, a long time ago, I was Lecturer of the Year, mostly because of the lectures I gave. And in the lectures, I started with 15-minute story. Some students hated it. They didn't vote. Some students loved it, and they did vote. So that's. But what I did was I tried to bring a story that captured their idea, and these were sometimes made up stories, sometimes they were stories that were partly true, sometimes they were true stories, but I used them in order to teach students, to make them think about ontology and epistemology by telling them a weird story about magic and elephants, and they would remember the story during the exam. And it's a classical trick. That's what all great religions use. They use stories in order to present messages. And it's hard work to prepare these stories and to make sure that they actually fit, and they should fit the double message, also the message on content. And an example of these stories is, one of these stories is that I tell my students that Paul McCartney is dead. And I do that in order to explain abductive reasoning. Next to inductive and deductive reasoning, there's abductive reasoning. And for years, I've been trying to explain them how abductive reasoning is very creative, very useful. However, it's also a bit problematic because it's not directly evidential. So I tell them that Paul McCartney has died, which is, of course, not true, I'm telling you. But with my students, for about 20 minutes, I tell them that Paul McCartney had died on Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock, 9th of November, 1966, because he didn't notice that the light had changed. He was in a car crash. He flew through the window. His skull broke open. It was after a fight with John Lennon. It's a big story, and he was replaced by a lookalike. And with any conspiracy theory, there's always an evil genius. In this case, it was the manager who said the Beatles can't quit, so we need a replacement. And what I use is album covers. I play music, and I talk with students about why this looks like a funeral, using all the clues that are on the album cover. And if you want to learn more about it, the internet is full of this conspiracy theory. But I use it up to a point that the students start believing it. And it sounds weird, but if you talk to students for about 15 minutes on all these clues, all the evidence that you can throw at them, it's what all conspiracy theories do, they start believing it. And it becomes also ethically a bit problematic, but they start believing it. And only then I tell them, well, wait a second, we're listening to a conspiracy theory here. And it's after they listen to the audio and we play back the audio, and then you can hear them saying, he wears a fake mustache, or Paul is dead, truly dead, miss him, miss him, miss him. Turn me on, dead man, all these kind of things. So I try to explain them, look, it's abductive in its coolest sense. And many conspiracy theories are appealing, and many conspiracies theories are not appealing at all, because they all end up racist and homophobic and anti-Semitic and so on. But the appeal of the conspiracy theory is to be the Sherlock Holmes, to find out stuff that wasn't there before and no one noticed, but unless you really, really take care and look at it. But one of the appeals is the abductive element in it. And I share with the student, look, this abduction works fantastically, and use it a lot, but always return to checking your data. And later on, it really works to tell the students, okay, very nice idea, very nice hypothesis. However, it might be good to consider this Paul is dead until you've actually proven it with solid induction and deduction. So that's trick one. And if you want to interrupt, don't hesitate. Trick two, and I use exaggeration here because this is about exaggeration. What I do in discussing the learning objectives in this course is say, look, we're doing two very distinct things. We are teaching you theoretical objectives. We are going to teach you the thing that some of you really love after your theory courses. Actually, this is partly a theory course, because we're going to talk about ontology and epistemology and constructivism and difficult words like phenomenology and hermeneutics and ethnomethodology. These kind of words will come along. And some students really love it. And according to David Silverman, you should never do this. And he writes this in one of the previous. Today I saw that it was going to be the 7th version of this book, but in the 2006 version, he wrote this: I've lost count of the run-of-the-mill qualitative research papers I've come across, which find it necessary to define their work in terms of obscure, I don't think they're obscure, but okay, philosophical positions such as phenomenology or hermeneutics. You will not find either of these terms in the glossary of this book for one simple reason. In my view, you do not need to understand these terms in order to carry out good qualitative research. Indeed, if you try to understand them, my guess is that you will not emerge from the library for many years. And obviously, this is not nonsense. There's some truth in it. However, there are this typification of these students. They're full of constructivist or critical theory ideas, notions on phenomenology. So we can act as, hey, let's not put this in the glossary. I can't hear you, but it's nonsense. They have to deal with this. So I bracket it. And I think it's also important for academic development for students and for understanding a constructionist critique. And as I said, they love it and we need it. So the exaggeration lies in the distinction I make between the theoretical objectives and the practical objectives, especially in the first week. So we teach them, okay, theory, methodology on that level versus, oh, now we're going to do some practical stuff. And we act as if there's a huge distinction between it. Obviously, there's not. But this is something that they will learn by doing. How will they learn this by doing? Well, partly because, and I slipped this in between, so I made a mistake in my little bridge that I want to create. I teach them methodology. I don't teach them software, less and less and less, because they learn how to use software quicker than I do now. They know how to use it quickly. And in the past, the first time I taught courses on that was still and Vivo. Then students really asked me, what do I do when I reach the end of the page? They didn't know how to scroll. Well, you never meet a student anymore who doesn't know that or these kind of things. So, and I try to teach them methodology and not just methods. I teach them techniques. I teach them how to do specific things. I give them tips on how to code, but I don't teach them do it exactly like this. No, I teach them methodologies with the thinking and the reflection behind it. But these are approaches that we discuss: content analysis, theme analysis, analytic induction, grounded theory, abductive analysis, conversation analysis, discourse analysis. Well, this is really superficial, both, to be honest. Well, the discourse is a bit, but the conversation is just showing them a bit and show them what tools they use. So this is a slide from my slides with students. The most important trick I'm going to share is this one, and that is trick 4. And trick 4 deals with to trick them into failure. And there are 2 ways of doing that: a more ethical and a less ethical one. The more ethical one, the soft way, is the 3-step rocket. And I've been using it in all my teaching, and in most of the teaching it has been a success. And what I do is a 3-step rocket. Sorry, I made a mistake here. I wanted to retype something, but I didn't. It's in Dutch, as you see. But the student do homework, then do a video lecture, and then have the tutorial. But I messed up something in Dutch, and then the moving stuff. But they do homework first. Before I teach them on anything, they work on theories or on methods. So they read something in the handbook, and they read a paper, and they have to apply trustworthiness to the paper. So they learn about trustworthiness set of quality criteria, and they have to apply it to a paper that doesn't use it. So what can you say about the trustworthiness of this paper? Which is hard if you just read about trustworthiness. If you are not very well trained yet in reading academic articles with a methodological lens, and only then I teach them about trustworthiness. And only then they receive a tutorial in which the paper is discussed. And they will never do this in a fully correct way. They're not graded on it, or they're graded really easily, so they receive a pass if they tried, and if they fail, if they tried but didn't answer any question correctly, doesn't matter at all, because they tried. So this is a soft way, a 3-step rocket: first the homework, then the lecture, and only then the tutorial in which we do this. Then there's the rough way, and I like doing that, but some people will see that this is tricky, and this is what we call the frustration assignment. The frustration assignment is that we tap into one of the typifications, and that is that people think when they do an assignment in which they have to do something with Atlas CI, that they are doing a software course. That they're not learning how to code, but they're learning how to click on buttons. And so we kind of deal with that. Hey, you have to learn how to click on the buttons. Here is something that you have to work with. We are going to give you a small assignment, deductive content analysis. I give them some data, interviews, for instance, or sometimes newspaper data. And I use a code system that I teach them beforehand, and I explain to them, look, this is, in this case, and I have different variants of this, this is interviews with people who, people with a Dutch native, whatever that may be, but a background. But when they talk about France, how do they talk about immigrant France? And it's based on the notion of Allport, the contact hypothesis, that if you know people and you collaborate with them, etc., you end up having more friendly views. So the ideas that we had was, okay, let's use interviews in which people talk about immigrant friends. My apologies. And whether they have immigrant friends or whether they don't have immigrant friends, and relate that to their opinions that are discussed later in the interview on immigrants, whether these are positive or negative opinions. Now, the problem is that the data seems to fit these codes, but it doesn't. That this hypothesis seems to fit these codes, but it doesn't. Why? Because these were interviews done in Amsterdam, and as it turned out, with mostly people with lots of cultural capital, rich native Dutch people, but we all vote left in Amsterdam. So, and we all tend to say that we have positive opinions on immigrants. Obviously not all, but not all people say it, but most people say it. So in the data, there's absolutely nothing that looks like a correlation. Is nothing that actually fits with this hypothesis, but students struggle with it, and they are coding in Atlas TI, and they're thinking about, oh, but wait a second, this person is actually talking about immigrant friends, but stretching the word friends in order to show to the interviewer that they're actually fairly progressive and non-xenophobic. So they're stretching the word friend, and they say, oh, yeah, at my sister's wedding, there was one guest who actually came from Iraq, I think. So it's not a friend, but it's someone they met and shook hands with. But then, okay, so people start stretching it, but also students start stretching it. And it leads to so much frustration on the content that they end up thinking a lot about me being an idiot, giving them this assignment, but also thinking a lot about what to do theoretically, what to do with the data, how to define concepts such as immigrant, how to define concepts such as friend, how to define concepts such as negative and positive ideas, because people might say a lot of positive things, but one negative thing that is very negative and very xenophobic or racist or whatever. So they're struggling with content and not with the software. They're not struggling with where to click and how big should my quote be. Well, partly, but mostly with the content. So they're struggling with this simple hypothesis and these seemingly simple definitions, but and they have three solutions to do. One is to quit, which is a very bad thing, and I feel really bad when students do this. So in the assignment, it says, this is harder than you think. Don't spend more than 10 hours on it, because I had students working on it for 50 hours, being extremely frustrated and crying with me. So that was very unethical. So I said, don't work more on it than 10 hours. But the solutions they use is they force their theory. They're simply blind to what the data says and simply say, okay, this is my theory, no matter what. I force it onto the data, or they adjust their theory. And these are the smart students, of course, and this is exactly what we want them to do. And when they force their theory, they can do it blindly, or they can do it critically. They say, oh, you told us to do this, but it doesn't really fit. But okay, if you really want me, I'll do it. But when they do this, they learn a lot. Because remember, when you were working on your own projects, or maybe you are working on your own project, it's very often very frustrating, but it's your own frustration in your larger project, and I make them frustrated in a 2-day, 3-day assignment that they work on. And the instruction and reflection afterwards kind of helps them in thinking about it. How am I doing time-wise? Oh, I run a bit. Oh, I'll run literally. What I do with my research master students, this is not what I do with my bachelor students because this is too hard and they're too big of a group. But what I do is I used to make them write an essay. But even before ChatGPT, it was really hard to mark these essays because these were research master students. They have better GPAs than I ever had. So they're way smarter than I am. And they write essays so well that I was trying to grade them and making distinctions that were completely measurement by fiat. So I thought, this is nonsense. Why am I doing this? And then they came complaining because peers had higher grades and I couldn't explain properly why there was 1 10-point or 10% higher, or sorry, 1% higher grade with the other students. So I quit doing that, and I told students that they have to visualize in class, and they could do anything except a presentation or a paper. How are the conclusions shaped by the methodology was the travel tip I gave them, and they have to read 6 peer-reviewed academic articles, and these articles should say that they do phenomenology, and many articles say they do phenomenology, but they don't, or say that they do framework analysis, and students could pick and match and then present it in any way except what I'm doing here, a lecturing or a presentation style. So what, and students are panicking for this, and it's just a small assignment in grading wise, but what they do is these kind of things. So this was a protest. So you can't really see, I blurred their faces. But here, sorry, I was pointing at it. Here they use this microphone, this protest microphone, and they're protesting on ethnomethodology. So they are bringing in, and I have them here. They were bringing in Garfinkel, and they were screaming, and other classes come and see what's happening there, but they were protesting as if they were occupying university. This group created a maze and made you go through different steps in this maze. This group made the game of snake and ladders of grounded theory, which was great fun because you end up going down all the time. Another group did this. They cooked in class, so they did research master chef. They do, this was a wine tasting, and this is Ido Tavori, or someone presenting as Ido Tavori. This is Stefan Timmermans, and they're doing wine tasting, actual wine, but then discussing the different papers like wine connoisseurs would do. So it's kind of a play. This group, and I have it here, it's lovely, they created Lego. And Lego in content analysis way, Lego in grounded theory way, and Lego in, oh, this is grounded theory, this is abductive analysis. So they created different Lego manuals following the methodology, which helps them to really think about these methods, but in a completely different way. And then we did Lego in class. So here you see they color coded it and then ended up not building a house because they were so busy color coding their buildings. But they end up thinking about the methodology and about the articles in a different way than they would do in an essay, which is for future PhDs actually a very nice way of dealing with their material. And it's great fun to do. This one is, all articles use different, I'm sorry, they were using articles on the same topic, but they ended up all being using grounded theory, as you see here, because it always ends up, say, with grounded theory on top, if it doesn't follow. So I make them visualize. Oh, and this is that they baked a pie for LSTI, but it had nothing to do, but they just thought it was fun. And it's, Taart is Dutch for pie, so they're joking with the name. The last assignment, and this is what I use in all my teaching, is actually make them do the research themselves seriously. So frustration is a little bit, is a teaser, but that's just 1 week. In this 4-week course, for 3 weeks, they're working on their own project, their own theme, their own question. Sometimes we played a bit with a theme, and we told them work on participation and protest, but also years that we just gave them hints or suggestions for data, and they worked on it themselves. And they had to do a more grounded theory-like or grounded theory light approach, work in pairs, reflect in pairs, and do a research. Although they only have 3 weeks, there's quite something that you can do. And they learn so much from doing that, especially when you make them work in teams, because we act as if we teach them a lot, especially when we bank our knowledge and deposit our knowledge with them, but they learn most from each other by coding in a certain way, and then the other one saying, what did you do with the data? I don't get it. And then memo writing becomes actually really useful because they are writing the memos for their peers. And it's getting better and better when the tools are getting better and better in collaboration. And the data are usually newspaper archives or internet sources, so easily accessible data, and could be anything from policy papers to newspapers or tweets or whatever they use. So to return to the student typifications, some we can kind of or try to take out, and it doesn't always work, obviously. Some students simply pass and they don't care about it anymore at all until they do their thesis, and then they grab back to this course. Some students still say this because they find it hard and it's not easy to learn how to do qualitative research or qualitative analysis in 4 weeks. Where's the analyze button? I tend to say that especially the frustration assignment really helps because they're struggling with that a lot, and then they find out, oh gosh, I need to think myself, and it's not the software that is providing any answers. So there, I would say some of these are successfully more or less tackled. Some concluding remarks. And the main message is, let's not ignore typification, because don't act as if students know nothing. They know a lot, and they're full of ideas on what qualitative research is, and that is, as I said, subjective or problematic. And here is a summary. Surprise them in stories, teach methodology, exaggerate some contrast, deliberately frustrate them to make them reflect on what they're doing, do serious play or alternative ways of presenting. We did a murder game where we had to find, oh, it's lovely, use curiosity to enthuse and to trigger their intrinsic motivation. So the only thing we are really strict on are the deadlines and the word counts and these kind of things, but not on how exactly they do the analysis. But as long as they try to answer a question, even if they don't answer a question, it's still fine. I think I need to stop here, and I hope I didn't deposit so much over your head that you all feel deadly tired, even though for some of you it's terribly early in the morning. Thanks for listening. And please welcome for any questions, comments.
Fabulous.
Shall I stop the share?
You can leave the share up if you like, in case you want to go back to any slides in the discussion. Thank you so much, Gerben. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Not just the content, but the way that you deliver it is very engaging and enjoyable to be part of. So thank you very much. There's some lovely comments coming through saying similar things in the chat, which you can have a look at later. I've got a few questions, but I want to open it up to everybody else. First of all, Nicholas has written something in the chat. Thank you for sharing your experiences in the spirit of collaboration and sharing lived experiences. See what I did there? Yeah. He says, here's a paper I'd written to help students appreciate the nuances of qualitative work, and hopes that he can chat with you in the future. So I'll make sure that everyone has access to that later. But before I I ask you some of my questions. Does anybody else have any questions or other comments they'd like to share with Gerben? I think you're more than welcome to open up your audio and speak.
Yes, please.
Okay, if not, then I've got a few. Oh, Asma, yes, please.
I don't know if it's a question or a comment or you can name it whatever. It was a great lecture. You were very engaging.
However,
However, yes,
yes.
I guess when I signed up, like you said, the tricks and tips, and the seminar ended, and I'm still looking for the tricks in terms of practicality. Like as a student, I'm a master's student, I'm a graduate student reading tons, and I get you when you get to the part where you say frustration. There's a lot of frustration. Especially for students coming from a positivist background. I'm a clinician, so I'm not a sociologist, but trying to undertake a research, a qualitative research in the healthcare domain. That involved a lot of frustration, trying to always switch the mindset between being very, again, positivist, biomedical paradigm, undertaking a qualitative research. That shift in mindset was not easy, still working on it. So I don't know, like I would like to gauge your expertise on how to go about it, and try to look into the data differently. Yeah, gauging theoretical frameworks in the analysis.
Yeah. Thanks for the nice words, and also thanks a lot for the critique. It's very valid, and I noticed, and my apologies, because when we wrote the text or when we discussed this, it was about teaching and learning, but my view was mostly as a teacher from a teaching perspective. So most of my tricks that I shared were kind of teaching tricks. And sorry, that was also my typification of you as audience. So I'm toggling my mind now in order to try to deal with your question. I like it, the question, and it's a common thing, especially in the medical field. And I did do some trainings in people in medical fields, and what helps a lot is reading literature, not on qualitative analysis first, but on mixing methods. It really helps in seeing how people there deal or have dealt with issues of philosophy of science and combining qualitative and quantitative material. So that would possibly be a tip to look a bit into how they dealt with it, and take a more, for instance, pragmatist perspective. And we all do ontological gerrymandering. Even the hardcore constructivist or even the hardcore positivist end up saying exactly opposite things. Maybe not in public, but in private, people do. So we all switch these positions, and it sometimes is hard, and it is an internal debate. And exactly on that debate, especially in mixed methods, lies the possible answers. It's where the discussions are, for instance, on how rigorous should we be in this qualitative project, because on the one hand, we try to do Verstehe and try to delve into people's view, but on the other hand, we need to compare 50 different people. How the hell do we do this? And it's partly a practical question. It's partly an ontological philosophical question, but well, taking a more pragmatist point of view, or actually have the debate, even if it's internal, is a good thing to do. And it's not easy to solve. So it's not, I'm sorry, I can't give you a very simple trick. Read this book and all your answers. And if anyone tells you that, they're probably gurus that try to get money out of you. So don't trust them.
No, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. No, you're absolutely right. There isn't, I think that's the nuance of qualitative. There isn't, when you, the reason I laughed when you said, where's the button? Because you start on this journey and you think, okay, I can do this, like I can click. And that's again, coming from a very positivist SPSS mindset. I'll click a button, the answer will come up. That doesn't happen with quality. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen, or fortunately, maybe.
Fortunately, and actually, I've taught statistics to anthropologists that hated statistics, of course. I loved the course. I loved to teach it because they really, really came in with so much hate. But if you can show that actually presenting a table is not an answer to the question, it's depending on how you interpret the table and how you interpret the number and how you interpret certain rules that are, well, thought of by statisticians 100 years ago because they did bets on cocktail or tea parties. Things like that have decided how we deal with statistics. So there's a lot of interpretation behind that as well. And as soon as you can tap into those discussions, like, okay, why are we agreeing that, oh, it's a significant level of 0.05, so we're done. No, we're not done. Absolutely not. Any statistician will tell you it's bloody nonsense to just look at that. But so there's a lot of interpretation there as well. And as soon as you dive into these discussions, especially with people in the medical field that are also not always as trained in statistics as they think they are, it's nice discussions, to say it.
Thanks, Gerben. I think
Thank
that's
you
a
very
really
much.
interesting. Yeah, thank you. I think Alexis has a comment or a question as well. Are you able to open your audio, Alexis?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes,
Hi.
I'm there.
Perfect.
Thank you. I like this course and just this time we exchange. I like it very much. It's very important for any time to know more about what you are thinking about. I think that your methodology is very nice, very important. To use it, I think we can usually use it sometime is about business market fit. I work in this area, and I know that we have made some research about market fit, about produce, about services, or sometimes about maybe user experience. So I want to know how we can mix this kind of needs of a market fit for companies, for enterprise, and this research methodology, or how we can use sometimes this knowledge with researcher to impact market business or market fit. It's something I like to know. I'm very enthusiastic about this one. I check something about, and this kind of method I see with you is very nice. I think that we can see a bridge, and how we can create this bridge will be very nice. It will be very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis, for a wonderful question, but also a question that to be honest, I really find hard to answer because I know nothing about markets and about the field of market services or marketing services. So I feel absolutely inadequate to properly talk about bridges to make. I can imagine that they're there, and I'm open, and I would also be open to discuss or think along, but. You hear I'm stumbling even because I really can't properly answer your question in a way that is not bluffing my way through. So I'm sorry.
I think that's fair enough, Gerben. It's always important, I think, to say if we can't answer questions, but
Yeah,
maybe something.
I really don't know, so I'm really willing to, but I'm too ignorant.
Okay, no worries. We're coming to the end of our time, so I can see that Jane has got a hand up as well. Are you able to ask your question nice and succinctly, quickly, Jane, for us?
The things.
Okay, I can't hear you, Jane. There's something
Can you hear
happening
me
with
now?
your.
Can you hear me now?
That's better, yeah.
Okay. I teach advanced qualitative research. One of the problems that I've experienced is finding data for teaching. Like, for instance, we know that there's a lot of ethical dilemmas in terms of how do we teach those students to collect the data? What permissions do they have? And now, what data can they use for practice, especially when you're talking about experiences, interviewing, and then bringing that into a transcript and analyzing it. How do you do it? How do you find your database? Is there a database source that you can use for practice of teaching? I really wanted to ask that.
Also a very good question. Thank you, Jane. In these courses, I make students use existing data because they're short-term courses. The Research Master course is 8 weeks. This undergraduate course is 4 weeks. So they use publicly available data. Sometimes they come from data sources, so oral history projects. There are quite some oral history projects in which the data is shared online, and we can use it. And quite some of the data that my students use are publicly available data, newspaper data. We need to teach them a lot about what uses newspaper data as a direct source, but that is possible. In the rest of our program, we make students collect data themselves, and we. In the Netherlands, the ethical guidelines are not as strict. I don't know where you're located, are not as strict as in the UK or the US, which means we can actually ask students to collect data, and they have to jump through some ethical hoops. But as long as they don't pick on very vulnerable groups or children, or they can collect data, they can do interviews or do observations. So we. In our final research projects that take half a year, they collect data and they do observations, and then it's not a problem. They do have to fill in forms and answer all kinds of questions, and the supervisor is there to check on the ethics. And there are quite some data sources available. So in the Netherlands, there are quite some data banks. In the UK, there's the UK Data Archive. Oh, it's also in the app, in the chat. I use data from the New York Times, where they did small interviews with people, 1 in 8 million. It's not publicly available anymore, but there are these kinds of data sets out there that you can actually use. And yeah, probably others can chime in and say more. Christina already typed, but there's more.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. I think a really engaging and thought-provoking session. Thank you for your questions. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, whether it's ending or just beginning. And look forward to having you on our future webinars. Remember that we're always keen to hear about topics that you'd like us to discuss in these webinars, and also to host you if you have something that you would like to share through this platform. Then we're here for that purpose as well. But thank you very much for being here, and look forward to touching base with you again. Thank you very much. Take care. Nice to see you all.